We're very honored to have Dr. Emma Bragdon back with us this afternoon. Dr. Bragdon has been a pioneer in body, mind, spirit wellness for 50 years. She's the founder and executive director of Integrated Mental Health University, imhu.org, and I'll put that link in the chat as well. She's a renowned author of 2 classic books on spiritual emergency, a seasoned facilitator with 40 plus years experience, and a pioneer in the field linking spiritual growth and mental health. She's one of 4 teachers of the Groff Legacy training in Latin America. Dr. Bragdon was with us almost 2 years ago now, and she gave a really fascinating talk on how Brazilian spiritists nurture medical intuitives and healers for work in psychiatric hospitals. You can check that out on our YouTube channel. So Emma, thank you for being with us this afternoon and for sharing about spiritual awakening and how it can manifest and just how important it is to mental health, especially during these times, right? These kind of increasingly crazy times.
Yes, thank you, Judy. I so appreciate being invited to come back and talk to your group, and it's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen. So first you might see a little bit of a mess, but then after that, there'll be some slides. Okay, I hope everyone can see that. And I guess I'll put the chat box up. What my preference is if someone has a question, you're very welcome to use the chat box, but I might not answer it right away, and I might wait until the end, depending how we go. So Judy asked me to especially speak about Kundalini awakening today. And from my point of view, Kundalini awakening really includes a raising of consciousness. And one way it manifests is by energy moving through the body, and sometimes moving in very dramatic ways. So today I'm going to be speaking about Dwapara Yuga, which is a term that comes out of yogic philosophy, and talk about this transition time. And because we are in a very dramatic transition time, as Judy mentioned, it is urgent to support people who are awakening, because some people are just popping open without a lot of preparation for what that is all about. Judy also asked me to speak about Integrative Mental Health University and what we do, and we are going through a lot of expansion right now. So I'm excited to tell you a little bit more about what we're up to and talk about the alignment we have with certain other organizations. I'll speak about donors that we have, books and film that are available, and towards the end, offer a 10% off coupon until the 27th of this month for all of our courses for anyone who is watching. So this particular cartoon, I think, is it says something about where we are right now, which is some people are cracking open and they're going to psychiatrists or psychotherapists who've been conventionally trained and might have excellent reputations. But the form that they use to assist people who are cracking open or who have fallen into rough times is not necessarily the most effective. And here's Humpty Dumpty, who having fallen off the wall. He's not a happy camper, and I'm not quite sure visualizing is going to help him. Another image of cracking open comes from Paige Bradley, a sculptress. In this case, though, the cracking open is not from a fall, like a physical trauma. Instead, she's cracking open because the light of a spiritual awakening is bursting out of her. That light is associated with expanding consciousness, or also known as Kundalini, which is very much associated with the rise of consciousness, typically from the sacrum, moving up the spine into the higher chakras. But the Kundalini can have its impact in other centers as well. And as it moves through the system, it literally cracks through the limitations we've had in our ego. It can feel really scary at first and disorienting. We actually wonder, who are we now? The shell that encloses us, the shell we're used to, cracks. And in this sense, the ego actually is cracking open. What becomes available, or what now appears, is a new identity. But the loss of identity can be highly disturbing. We wonder who we are, especially in the process of one identity leaving and something else being born, as it were. We can call it a spiritual emergency when this process is happening, especially when it's associated with disorientation and a kind of disturbance, really wondering who we are and how we want to do our life. The good news is that if this process is managed and supported wisely, it leads to increased peace, increased life satisfaction, for some people, even a blissful feeling. And these are all the markers of human evolution. So I'm going to refer us to a man that I affectionately call Sri Yukteswar. You can see his photograph here. And he was actually the guru of Paramahansa Yogananda. If you have read Autobiography of a Yogi, you have certainly heard about Sri Yukteswar because he was the Param Guru, or the guru of another guru, meaning in this case, Yogananda. He was the author of a book called The Holy Science, which was published in 1894. And we could say, well, wait a minute, that's a little bit out of date at this point. But actually, it describes a transition that we're going through right now. And some people might think we're moving into the Aquarian age, or we're moving into a new age. But using the language that Sri Yukteswar, as well as yogic philosophers, will use, we're moving out of the Kali Yuga, which is the darkest kind of age, into a Dwapara Yuga. And this was foretold 2,000 and 3,000 years ago, possibly even longer. Some people say 5,000 years. So in the Kali Yuga, the darkest age, people believe that the only thing that is really trustworthy, that you can believe in and that you should believe in, is something that you can experience with your 5 senses. So you can see it, you can smell it, you can touch it, you can feel it, you can hear something coming from it, and people are having that shared reality. But anything outside of that is considered foolish. In fact, some people were considered absolutely crazy if they believed that there was anything outside of that. So from that particular frame of reference, we are our bodies and we are flesh and blood, and that's the reality of it. And we have the 5 senses and we orient by the 5 senses. But in the Dwapara Yuga, which is very synchronous with the quantum physics, we are primarily space and energy, which we may not see, and very few people will actually be able to sense it with anything close to the 5 senses. So we are moving into a zone where we can feel through our intuition or third eye, 6th sense, that we are all connected. It may not happen to everyone, but we're moving in the Dwapara age towards that particular orientation, that we are all connected. And quantum physics tells us that there is an entanglement of consciousness. So not only are we interconnected, I mean, we can feel at one with each other, but there is an entanglement, so that there is an interaction that's going on constantly in consciousness with everyone. So in the Dwapara Yuga, what that will manifest as, and is already manifesting as, is the fact that we are becoming more highly intuitive. Some people will be able to see energies and thus be able to practice energy medicine or energy healing from the perspective of really being able to experience energy moving through someone's system and being able to assist people to have more balanced energy. Some people will be able to heal, to channel from higher intelligence, have psychic perceptions, see past lives. And there'll be a tremendous draw to live from the soul rather than the ego. So just as Humpty Dumpty fell down and from Carol's point of view, the ego cracked open, what then becomes accessible is that we can live from the soul, something that resides inside of us very deeply. Some of us will also be able to deepen our personal connection to Creator God, whatever we call that Creator God or higher self. And of course, some people will move into having Kundalini experiences that may not lead to a full Kundalini awakening, where there is really full self-realization, but having the Kundalini experiences will be part of consciousness moving into a more expanded state. If you want to know more about the transition of the yugas, you can watch a free program called The Great Year Movie, which is available on YouTube to watch for free. It's a really fascinating review of the yugas and how we are moving through it. Let's see. So here's just a picture that will give you a little bit more perspective on this. You can see down here with the red arrow, we are here at the beginning of the 21st century, moving out of the Kali Yuga and moving up into the Bronze Age or the Dwapara age. And we will be in that particular age cumulatively for 2,400 years. And there is an ascension going on, which means that in the Silver Age and the Golden Age, consciousness will be even higher. In other words, it will be more supportive that more people are moving into higher consciousness, which will also mean more people will have access to full Kundalini awakening. But at this point in the transition, we are just moving out of that dominant belief that something like Kundalini doesn't exist. It's part of the superstition left over from an older age, and we should just let go of it because technology will bring us into much more success. So that's part of the thinking. And so there's a distrust of the older spiritual texts and with some people, and yet because there is support as we move into the Dwapara age, there will be a renewal of interest and dedication to some of the older spiritual texts and meditation techniques for moving into higher consciousness. So I want to tell you the story of a lovely man that I was able to work with in this past summer. I've changed his name. This is not his photograph, and I do want to protect his identity. But he's a wonderful illustration of something that can happen during this period of transition. So I'll call him Maynard. At the time I saw him, he was 20 years old, a university student, meaning he was enrolled in university. But at the time I saw him, he was very distressed. In January of that year, he had called his mother and said, I'm not in good shape at all. I'm not sure what I need. And his mother picked him up from university. And so he took time away, lived with his mother in his mother's home and with her partner, and was trying to sort out what had happened with him. So I met him in March of this year. And at that particular time, you know, one of my questions was, has there been any significant trauma in your life? And he said, no, there was no specific trauma that he could remember. And his family was not one that was prone to poverty. They actually had excellent lifestyle habits, for instance, excellent food, plenty of sleep, lots of access to the out of doors, lots of grounding, and his parents were quite well educated. So the way his story goes is that in the fall of 2021, like most university students, he experimented with a mind-expanding drug. And he wasn't with anyone who was qualified to guide him, but that's typically the way it is for university students and for a lot of other people too. They don't wait for the guide, they want to do the exploration. So we had the experimentation. It seemed to go okay. It was fine. And unlike a lot of university students, he decided that he wanted to start a meditation practice. He was meditating and doing yoga up to an hour and a half a day. And then it was in January that he had a relatively stressful week. He was starting university again, and there were some personal stresses he had with a girlfriend and family member. And suddenly he was having experiences where he was extremely uncomfortable. And part of it was the Kundalini awakening. He had had in his former education absolutely no preparation for something like a spiritual awakening that was very intense. No thought of what Kundalini was about. It hadn't entered his language. And so the only thing that he could think of was that in that sense of being out of control and having experiences that his peers were not having, he thought, maybe I've gotten crazy. So his mother, a very well-meaning and responsible woman, took him to a psychiatrist, as most of us would with a son in his age group. And the psychiatrist said, well, this is a psychotic process. He needs antipsychotics. And so this young man, Maynard, went home and started to take antipsychotics with the suggestion that he might have to do some kind of medication for the rest of his life. So this is quite typical of some of what is given to us through more conventional psychiatrists who have no understanding that this is a time where more people are going to be popping open as a result of stresses, as a result possibly of psychedelic use, or as a result of just this being the time of transition into the Dwapara Yuga. So as his mother started to really reconsider if the psychiatrist was accurate, she came upon the understanding of spiritual emergency and contacted me. And then I had the opportunity to work with both of them, but especially the young man, for a period of a few months. And during that time, he recognized for himself that he really was not part of a lunatic fringe. He was going through something called a spiritual emergency, which he very much identified with. He began feeling like his deep connection to God and sense of oneness with God and a lot of strong connections with nature as well, that was just something that was coming to him as a gift and was not illustration of him being a lunatic or being crazy. It was his fear of the experiences he was having that seemed strange to him that was the most agitating part of his process. But still, there were very big things that were happening around him. For instance, at one point, lightning came down into the yard close to the house. And he wondered to himself, is that part of the energetic awakening I'm having? What is this power that's flowing through me or around me? I don't understand it. So he was being forced in a way to go into a deeper understanding of what this awakening was about and what it meant for him in terms of his relationship to nature, his relationship to family, his relationship to God, and his relationship to his own body. So personal power and power itself becomes an important question during these times when there's such a profound awakening. So one of the things to take note of is that during this transition into the Dwapara Yuga, very few people are really prepared for the kind of Kundalini experiences that can happen. And in Maynard's case, there was a lot of emotion, which could be crying, or it could be feeling ecstatic. And it could also be feeling a lot of grief or fear. And sometimes those emotions would come one after the other. And there would be also a very strong push to take care of anything that had been disturbing on a psychological level, which comes with the kind of strong, powerful, energetic experiences that we identify with Kundalini to be about. So, as I hope you've recognized, this young man was quite disoriented because he had no cognitive framework at all for what he was going through. He had a lot of fear. And then when he was considered psychotic, as Carol had been, that scared him even more. But he recognized with some help, and I gave him an understanding of spiritual emergency, that he was going through a kind of transformation, and that it was demanding of him a certain purification, not that he would become pure like Jesus Christ is pure overnight, and would be a bad person if he didn't become like Christ overnight, but instead there was a need to resolve psychological wounding that he had in the past. And so he was diligent in working with himself and taking that responsibility, as Carol did, and in therapy for many years, and as this young man has done, is part of what comes with the possibility of these strong experiences leading to a resolution that is all about an expanded consciousness, and actually a way of functioning in the world where there's a profound peace, some will call it bliss, as well as a desire to be in service to other people, and a desire to really help support the planet as it goes through a major transformation as well. So many people who experience spiritual emergency and have a positive resolution will actually become quite active in the realm of assisting with the planet in the crisis that we're going through right now. But spiritual awakening does not need to involve a crisis. So as Maynard got appropriate support, he realized that he was not in a situation of being mentally ill. He got a cognitive framework that he was able to accept, and that set his mind at rest. And he was able to recognize that other people were going through such experiences. And so he established more a sense of community. He wasn't alone. And one of the most disturbing parts of this kind of awakening for some people is they feel extremely alone and isolated without a cognitive framework and without any knowledge that other people are going through it. So I've put SRF here on this slide that represents the Self-Realization Fellowship, which is an organization that was founded by Yogananda back in 1920 and is still exists and is extremely helpful for those people who want to deliberately move towards a fuller Kundalini awakening. The practices that can be helpful for people who want to move into these expanded states without the crisis, but in a more gentle way, are practices that involve specific meditations and, for some people, body-oriented psychotherapy. So I recently created a course at Integrative Mental Health University called Why is Supporting Awakening? Why is it urgent to support awakening? And I would say it's urgent because there are so many more people who are popping open in a way similar to Maynard, sometimes at a young age, for instance, 20 years old as he was, but possibly even younger. I talked to a woman who's a psychotherapist who said she started having these experiences at 7 years old. There are other people who will have these opening experiences closer to the time of transition, literally deathbed. And there are people who are more in middle age when their children have left the home and are past university age, may be saying to themselves, well, what is really meaningful? Well, I want to move into higher states of consciousness through a meditation practice. But it's important to note that people can come into these experiences at any age. And the belief from the yogic philosophy is that there are actually younger people being born now who, possibly from past lifetimes, but are prepared already with a higher consciousness than most people. And so one of their difficulties is actually supporting their own higher consciousness around people who are still steeped in the thought forms and belief systems of Kali Yuga. So with Kali Yuga, unfortunately, it has led specifically to a lack of value of connection to the earth and all creatures, and a lack of connection to direct communion with Creator God. So perhaps it's the Kali Yuga, which is termed the darkest age, that it's led to the environmental crisis and what some people will call a suicide mission of our culture. It has also led to world wars and weapons of mass destruction because it's been supporting a theme of domination and subjugation. But in the Dwapara Yuga, with more people moving into these kinds of experiences of the Phoenix rising or Kundalini awakening, there's a profound connection to the deeper self and to the earth and all creatures, all elements. So as we move into this, we are not only recognizing our interdependence, but compassion for all. So of course, all of the trials and tribulations that are going on politically are very much being affected by this transition time. And some of us, and I'm sure there are many of you who are connected to this foundation, have a desire to construct and maintain a culture based on the soul, not the ego. I thought we'd enjoy just a little cartoon time. So a couple of dinosaurs. Master, this millennium is way too stressful. Are we entering a new Yuga? Yes, just relax. Learn to meditate. Breathe light into your third eye. Stay out of the tar pits, meaning that sticky, dark region. So there is, within people who are looking at the earth changes and also changes in consciousness, there's a recognition there are a lot of energetic changes that will continue to challenge us, stirring up negativity, but also clearing things so that we can be prepared for the coming golden ages. I think I skipped a slide. Yes. So how am I doing with time? Judy asked that I speak a little bit about what IMHU is offering. One of the courses that we offer and that's quite popular is a course called Kundalini Bioenergy and Awakening. It's a 3-hour course, including a pre-recorded webinar and live discussion, and it offers CEs for those who are already licensed professionals who need to accumulate a certain number of continuing education credits every year. So there's been some very dynamic discussions online that have happened with the many people who are following IMHU. So we have an international group that comes together to talk about Kundalini and how to manage it, and also how to differentiate it from a bioenergetic kind of release. So fortunately, there are bioenergetic therapies and energy therapies that help us to catalyze emotional releases left over from trauma that we may have had earlier in our lifetime. So these are very important and can really help us to move out of the kind of burdens of trauma that we may be carrying around. But they don't necessarily mean that we're having a Kundalini awakening. So being able to discern the difference between a bioenergetic release and a Kundalini awakening can be extremely important as we move along into an age of higher consciousness. There's also been a lot of misinformation about Kundalini and its relationship to sexuality. Some people saying, well, practice Kundalini because it will enhance your sexuality. And then there are others, Yogananda being one, who is recognized internationally as self-realized, who says that as the Kundalini awakens, it needs to be channeled up the spine and using that tremendous energy to move into the sexual realm is like diverting a river into another passageway, so it can't go fully up the spine into enlivening the higher chakras, but becomes diverted, and actually people will oftentimes become more self-involved, in other words, more ego involved, if they divert this Kundalini energy into the sexual realm. So there's a lot to discuss about Kundalini, and a lot of alive discussions happen. So if you're interested, you can sign up anytime, and that is through imhu.org. So I wanted to mention that many people ask me, like, how did you get into this anyway? And I was in my 60s when I started Integrative Mental Health University. I was inspired mainly because I'm kind of a poster child for spiritual emergence, meaning I didn't have a spiritual emergency. I didn't go through what Carol went through in terms of being in a psychiatric institution. I didn't go through what Maynard went through. No one ever told me that I should be taking antipsychotics. Instead, I had, through very fortunate circumstances, I had teachers that were completely self-realized, starting with Suzuki Roshi of the San Francisco Zen Center back in the late 60s. He was my teacher when I was just 20 years old. So, but as a result of really focusing on spiritual emergence and emergency with tremendous guidance that I've had the good fortune to receive, I started the Foundation for Energy Therapies in 2008. It's a charitable organization, a 501c3. And one of the things that we feel is extremely valuable is to bring the knowledge of spiritual awakening, spiritual emergency, or the crisis that sometimes people go through, to bring that kind of knowledge into the field of mental health. Because at this point, even though Stan Grof and myself and others have made the language of spiritual emergence and emergency more accessible, it's still not a kitchen table kind of word. So the foundation for energy therapies was started to bring more attention to this, but also specifically to do education as well as research. So we are very aligned with what Stan Grof taught, and he, with his wife Christina, started the Spiritual Emergence Network in 1980. I've been honored to be chosen by Stan to be a trainer in his Grof Legacy Training in Latin America. This will be the second year doing that. And we are offering continuing education credits for healthcare providers. So we're really hoping to impact those people who are in an educational process to expand their knowledge of how spirituality interfaces with mental health. We are also very much encouraging peer coaches because sometimes people like Maynard or people like Carol, because they do have lived experience, can relate very much to those who are going through the experience, who are feeling disoriented, who don't have a cognitive framework, and just need to know they're not alone. And oftentimes just the contact with a peer from that point of view can be tremendously stabilizing and be the key that helps a person move into the higher states of knowing, meaning more peace and more confidence in themselves and more balance. So we're training both healthcare providers as well as peers. And at this particular point, we're reaching out to accredited universities who are interested in licensing the kinds of training that we do. In fact, some of them want us to bring the training of spiritual emergence coaches into a university environment. These are accredited universities. So the other aspect of the Foundation for Energy Therapies is research, and we have been making inroads in doing research around spiritist therapies in Brazil, which I studied for 11 years and have written about and produced films about. So I'm extremely interested in it. But we're also have just done a grant proposal around peak states therapies or techniques for dissolving the effects of trauma. So because of time, I'm not going to tell another story about that, but we're excited about the research that's in the offing. So I just wanted to say that for most people, when they think about the niche of IMHU, they think about, well, that's the place where Emma Bragdon's teaching about spiritual emergence and spiritual emergency, which is totally accurate. We do give a series of 5 online webinars with adjacent materials to educate people about spiritual emergence and emergency and helping to effectively support people in spiritual emergency. And for those who want to go on to be certified as spiritual emergence coaches, we also give an on-location 2-day course. But we also have literally 40 courses, and they're divided into certain categories. For instance, one category is the phenomena of awakening, which can contribute to people having more of a cognitive framework about this whole arena that opens up in the Dwapara age. And in that category, there are a number of courses. We also offer a way of learning more about the spiritist therapies in Brazil. And I was particularly attracted to them because with the spiritist psychiatric hospitals, and there are 50 of them in Brazil, they have a way of working with people in spiritual emergency where they can recognize the gifts that are coming from the spiritual emergency and help a person harness those gifts so they can be of more support to the person themselves as well as to others. For instance, some people who have the kind of experiences that Maynard had are gifted with an ability to be healers or possibly being even medical intuitives. These gifts can manifest in a variety of ways. So, it's not always so that someone in a spiritual emergency is going to move into being a healer, but it is often the case that people who do open up through spiritual emergence or emergency do acquire gifts that can be extremely useful in healing. So we have other categories as well at IMHU. For instance, we'll be working more in the coursework around trauma and mitigating trauma in the next year, but we have several courses on psychedelic assisted psychotherapies and promoting ones that are legal and ways of working with it that are legal. We also have courses on effective alternatives to psychiatric medication, working with stress management. And one of the most important things that we offer the community is an international directory of those who've been trained and are certified as spiritual emergence coaches. So we've got about 100 of them right now. The aligned organizations, the ASSIST stands for the American Center for the Integration of Spiritually Transformative Experiences, and they have been around for a number of years. We feel very aligned with what they're doing. They also have a very strong educational component. Spiritual Awakenings International started just a little over a year ago, and they offer some free services in terms of educational lectures as well as support groups. I've been particularly impressed by the Royal College of Psychiatrists in the UK because they have an interest group that was started in the 1990s of an interest group studying spirituality and mental health. And it has grown from a handful of people to 4,500 psychiatrists. And they are publishing wonderful books that can really assist those people who were steeped in the Kali Yuga idea of what creates mental illness into a much more Dwapara oriented idea, which is that spiritual emergence and is something that is going on for people. In fact, bringing spirituality into mental health care is extremely important and can enhance and optimize mental health. So the two books that are here on this slide have been particularly meaningful to me lately. The Scientific and Medical Network in the UK also has wonderful lectures that are available online, and they have done also some excellent publications. And of course, we are trying our best to align with other universities for undergraduate as well as graduate programs, nursing and medical schools. The current donor that we're working with is EPRC, which is a mouthful, Emergent Phenomenology Research Consortium, difficult to say 10 times quickly, but they have a wonderful mission, which is believing that healthcare systems should understand awakening experiences better and bring about the kind of optimal mental health that's possible when we truly understand and support these emergent experiences. So if anyone here is interested in contributing to IMHU, we are doing our very best to expand right now. And we depend on registrations for our courses, but we try to keep those in quite low in terms of registration fees, because a lot of people who are going through spiritual awakening processes are not particularly wealthy. So we try to make our courses very accessible to everyone, including giving partial scholarships. But this particular URL, imhu.org/contributions, is a place that you could make a contribution if you feel so moved. I just wanted to say a little bit more about the books that I've written. The upper left-hand corner used to be called a source book for helping people in spiritual emergency, but I changed the title when the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which is really the dictionary that's used by most healthcare providers involved with mental health concerns, they recognized for the first time in the early 90s something called spiritual problems, not spiritual emergence or emergency, but spiritual problems. So I changed the title to go along with that, to assist people to understand what the process of spiritual emergence and emergency was about. Harper San Francisco asked me to write the book, The Call of Spiritual Emergency, in 1990. And that is full of stories of people who have had spiritual emergencies and resolved them in positive ways. So it can be very affirming for anyone who is close to going through a spiritual emergency. The books you see more on the right-hand side, Kardec Spiritism, is clearly about Spiritism in Brazil. It's kind of an armchair tour through Spiritist community centers, of which there are 13,000 that are really supporting spiritual evolution, or they don't use the term the Dwapara age, but that's basically what they're doing, is supporting the kind of evolution that we will all have more access to in the Dwapara age. The Spiritism to the far right and the upper right-hand corner is a documentary film created about Spiritism, both in the United States as well as in Brazil. And in the lower right-hand corner, Spiritism and Mental Health, that's a more academic book that chapter by chapter was written by Brazilian psychologists and Brazilian psychiatrists about Spiritist therapies and their impact. And then this, in the center, the newest DSM is kind of a satire on the DSM. And instead of saying the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM stands for Deliberately Seeking Mental Health. But that's available online at imhu.org/store, as well as another book called Resources for Extraordinary Healing, which spans a number of different ways to move into more optimal mental health. So contact information, my email, I welcome you if you want to contact me directly. I would prefer if you want to contact me, you do it through email rather than phone, but my phone number is there, and that's a landline. I don't accept texts. The website imhu.org will take you into being able to access all of our courses. The website emmabragdon.com would take you into more information about my private practice, because I do private consultation with people who are looking for that. Our Facebook page is here, and we are just recently have created a very full YouTube channel called Spiritual Emergency Support. If any of you want to take any of our courses and take advantage of the 10% off coupon, please use the word ASCEND, ASCEND, at registration, and that will get you the 10% off. And that's good through the 27th of this month. And then I put in the URL, the webpage for the Kundalini course, because we've spoken about Kundalini during this particular talk, and I thought you might be interested in that, the address for that. Okay, so that's the end of the slides,